The true story of Billy the Kid they never told you. Legend says Billy the Kid killed 21 men, one for every year of his life, painting him as a cold-blooded monster and the greatest threat in the Old West. But what if I told you that story is a lie, and he was actually a loyal orphan forced into a life of crime to avenge the only father figure he ever knew? The truth is far more complex. Stick with us, because today we uncover the real history of the boy behind the gun to decide if he was a hero or a villain. Welcome to We Are Baby Boomers. If you love uncovering the secrets of the past, please hit that like button and subscribe right now. It really helps us keep these memories alive. The birth of an outlaw. The story of America's most famous outlaw doesn't begin with a gunshot, but with a whisper. He was born around 1859, likely in New York, with the name Henry McCarty. Fatherless from an early age, Henry moved west with his mother, Catherine, and his brother in search of a better life. But the American frontier was not an easy place. At age 14, tragedy struck. His mother died in Silver City, New Mexico, the victim of a prolonged illness, likely tuberculosis, leaving Henry and his brother completely alone in the world. Suddenly orphaned and destitute, young Henry did what he had to do to survive. His first crimes weren't bank robberies or shootouts, but petty thefts of food and clothing. At 16, he was arrested for the first time. But instead of submitting to the system that had abandoned him, he escaped, fleeing his cell just days later. It was an early sign of his cleverness and his refusal to be cornered. Fleeing to the Arizona Territory, he adopted one of his many aliases, Kid Antrim. It was there, at age 17, that his life changed forever. During an argument in a bar, a local blacksmith named Frank Windy Cahill, known for being a bully, began to taunt and physically assault him. Pushed to the brink, the young Henry fought back. He drew a gun and fired, killing Cahill. Witness accounts suggest it was an act of self-defense, not cold-blooded murder. But the law didn't see it that way, and he became a wanted man. He fled back to New Mexico, adopting the name the world would come to know him by, William H. Bonney. Still a teenager, he was already a fugitive, a horse thief, and, in the eyes of the law, a killer. To the outside world, he seemed to be on his way to becoming just another nameless bandit. But fate had other plans. In the heart of New Mexico, in the turbulent Lincoln County, he would find not just trouble, but something he never had, a family. And the loss of that family would turn his fight for survival into a war for revenge. The Lincoln County War, the fight for revenge. Lincoln County in the late 1870s was not for the faint of heart. It was a territory controlled by a corrupt monopoly known as the House, led by Lawrence Murphy and James Dolan. They controlled the economy, politics, and the law, using their influence to crush any competition. It was a closed system where justice was bought and sold. It was into this setting that a young, ambitious English businessman named John Tunstall arrived, determined to break the House's power. He opened a competing store and bank, building his own empire. Unlike the men of Murphy and Dolan, Tunstall was seen as an honest and progressive man, and it was he who saw something in the young, troubled William Bonney. Tunstall offered Billy a job on his ranch, But he offered him much more than that. He gave him respect, a purpose, and, most importantly, a sense of belonging. For the first time in his life, the orphan, Henry McCarty, had a mentor, a protector, a father figure. Billy became fiercely loyal to Tunstall. It seemed that, finally, the boy had found a path away from crime. But that peace was brutally shattered. In February 1878, John Tunstall was murdered in cold blood by a posse working for the house. The posse that killed him was led by Sheriff William Brady's men. Billy and other ranch hands witnessed the murder of their boss and friend. For Billy, this wasn't just a murder. It was a declaration of war. Seeking what they considered justice, Tunstall's men were legally deputized as the Regulators, a group commissioned by the local justice of the peace with the power to arrest Tunstall's killers. They had, at least temporarily, a stamp of legal authority on their side. Billy, now part of this law enforcement group, joined them body and soul. Their goal wasn't chaos, but to bring the men who killed their mentor to justice. The Regulators, with Billy among them, began to hunt down the murderers. In a bold move, they ambushed and killed Sheriff William Brady and his deputy on the main street of Lincoln, the very men who were the faces of the corrupt law that allowed Tunstall's murder. It was an act of retaliation, but in the eyes of the Regulators, it was the only justice possible. However, the House used its immense political influence to turn the tables. They managed to have the Regulators' legal warrants revoked, transforming them overnight from lawmen into outlaws. The ensuing conflict, the Lincoln County War, was a brutal conflict that culminated in a 5-day battle. The Regulators were surrounded. The house where they took refuge was set on fire, and Tunstall's partner, Alexander McSween, was killed. Billy and the survivors managed to escape through the flames, but the war was lost. The system had won, and Billy the Kid was now, officially, a hunted outlaw. The betrayal and the legendary escape. With the end of the Lincoln County War, the violence didn't stop. The New Mexico Territory was a powder keg, and the federal government sent a new governor to put out the fire. Lew Wallace, a former Civil War general and future author of the famous novel Ben-Hur. Wallace had a mission: restore order, and he knew the key was dealing with the conflict's most notorious figure, Billy the Kid. In March 1879, one of the most unlikely meetings in Old West history took place. Governor Lew Wallace met secretly with Billy the Kid. Billy, who had witnessed a key murder, agreed to testify against the killers in exchange for a promise of a full pardon from the governor. Letters exchanged between the two show an agreement was in place. Billy would surrender, testify, and then be cleared of his pending charges. True to his word, Billy the Kid testified. He risked his life by pointing the finger at the powerful men who controlled the county. He fulfilled his part of the deal. But the system, once again, failed him. The district attorney, an ally of the House, refused to release him, and the pardon Wallace promised never materialized. Instead of freedom, Billy was eventually captured, tried for the murder of Sheriff Brady, convicted, and sentenced to death by hanging. The system didn't want justice. It wanted a scapegoat to close the bloody chapter of the Lincoln County War, and Billy the Kid was the perfect target. The boy who trusted a governor's promise was left to rot in a cell, awaiting the gallows. But if there's one thing life had taught Billy, it was to trust no one but himself. On April 28, 1881, while imprisoned in the Lincoln County Courthouse, he staged the most legendary escape of the Old West. After asking to be taken to the outhouse, he managed to surprise his guard, Deputy James Bell, on the stairs, killing him with his own gun. He then grabbed a shotgun and waited at the second-story window. When the other guard, Robert Ollinger, who had taunted and humiliated him, ran to see what the commotion was, Billy fired, killing him instantly. Free, but now doubly condemned, Billy the Kid was completely alone. His quest for justice had turned into a desperate fight for his own life. He had beaten the law, but his legend was about to collide with the man tasked to hunt him down, a man he might have once called a friend. The end of the trail. After his spectacular escape, Billy the Kid was the most wanted man in the Southwest. Newspapers across the country ran stories, many of them exaggerated, about his exploits, turning the young outlaw into a dark celebrity. But his freedom had a price. To capture him, dead or alive, the powerful interests in New Mexico elected a new sheriff for Lincoln County, Pat Garrett. The choice of Garrett added a layer of personal tragedy to the drama. Garrett and Billy knew each other. Some say they had played cards and shared drinks together in Fort Sumner. But Garrett was an ambitious man, and elected on the promise of bringing order, he knew his career depended on one thing: the capture of Billy the Kid. The old acquaintance became the hunter. For months, Garrett pursued his prey. He had captured Billy once in December 1880, which led to the trial and death sentence from which Billy escaped. Now, the hunt was on again. Garrett was relentless, following every lead, every rumor. The trail finally ended on the night of July 14, 1881. Garrett learned that Billy was hiding near Fort Sumner, at the home of a mutual friend, Pete Maxwell. Under the cover of darkness, Garrett and two deputies went to Maxwell's ranch. What happened next is a matter of debate, but the most accepted version, told by Garrett himself, is that of a tense, swift encounter. Garrett entered Pete Maxwell's dark bedroom to question him. At that moment, Billy the Kid walked into the room. Not recognizing the figure in the shadows, he asked in Spanish, "Quién? Garrett, recognizing Billy's voice, didn't hesitate. He fired twice into the darkness. One bullet struck Billy in the chest, killing him almost instantly. He was only 21 years old. The most famous outlaw of the Old West died in a dark room without ever having the chance to draw his gun. So, what about the legend that started this video? The story that Billy the Kid killed 21 men, one for every year of his life. It's a myth. That story exploded thanks to sensationalist obituaries and the press of the era, which published that he had killed a man for every year of his life. Historians agree the real number is much lower, likely around 8 or 9 deaths. Many of those occurred during the Lincoln County War, where he was acting as part of the Regulators, a group with temporary legal authority. Pat Garrett's later book, The Authentic Life of Billy the Kid, while highly romanticized and inaccurate, helps cement Billy's image as a notorious killer. Billy the Kid was not a saint. He was a cattle rustler and a gunman. But his story is not that of a simple villain. It's the story of a boy the world abandoned, an orphan who found a father figure, only to see him murdered by a corrupt system. His life of crime was fueled by a twisted search for revenge and justice, a quest in which he was betrayed by those in power, including the governor himself. The legend of Billy the Kid the killer of 21 men, was buried with him that night in Fort Sumner. But the story of Henry McCarty, the loyal boy who fought, loved, and died for what he believed in, even if violently and mistakenly, that's the one that survives, and that is the true story they never told you. So what is your verdict? Was he a villain or a victim? Let us know in the comments, and do not forget to subscribe to We Are Baby Boomers to keep history alive.